So what do we learn this week about blue-white monument in Modern? And I feel like it's a good news, bad news kind of thing. So we got to see the power of the deck, and the deck do some really good things. Maybe the best example was like against the Smallpox deck, where we were just able to go super wide, we get all our stuff back from the graveyard, we get to do like really powerful grindy stuff. It didn't really matter, our opponent was playing Planeswalkers and Smallpox, and they were like, yeah, whatever, like we outvalue you like crazy. There's just no way you can keep up with what our deck's doing, we get everything back. So that's a good part of the deck, is we're very good in those matchups. We have a crazy card advantage engine for those situations in Sky Hussar. We have all this weird tricky stuff. We have the infinite token combo where infinite equal to the number of lands we control token combo with White Mane Lion. We can exile stuff permanently with Spell Queller. So there's good stuff going on. We can do a lot of cool things. So that's the good news. I feel like this deck has a really good shot at fighting against mid-range, slower aggro decks, those type of fair decks. On the other hand, we also got to see some of the problems with the deck. Number one, our matchup against Burn felt ridiculously bad. Like, we lost to Burn, we lost to Goblins, and those matches didn't even feel a little bit close. So I think we have problems on the aggro side of the curve. We do have some okay blockers. Wall of Omens, I guess. Reflector Mage is better when you're bouncing bigger things, but still, it's an okay blocker. Spell Queller, so we have some good creatures. The problem is we don't really have any life gain or way to, like, interact, so I feel like one easy fix for the deck that would make it better in those matchups would be Lone Missionary or a Kitchen Finks. There's some white creatures we can play, and our deck is built around just playing bad white creatures to trigger a Ketra's Monument. So I feel like we could easily put in some bad white creatures that gain us life. I don't know the exact breakdown. I mean, maybe it's go down a couple of Reflector Mages for a couple of Kitchen Finks or something along those lines to take advantage of the fact that white has such good creatures against burn and aggro decks. So that part should be fixable. The other thing that we kind of ran into against Tron, and I feel like this would carry over to other unfair matchups as well, is we don't really have good ways of dealing with these decks. I mean, we just talked about Tron. We got nothing. I mean, as soon as we saw it was Tron, we looked through the deck list and we don't have a single card that really does anything outside of our 3 sideboard Stony Silence, and that's just not enough. So even though we won a game, I feel like we got super lucky to win. Our opponent just kind of whiffed a bit and we were able to go wide. But I feel like that's a really bad matchup for us because the problem with our deck in unfair matchups, and this goes beyond Tron to other combo decks, is while we have a little bit of light interaction, like something like Spell Queller, we can get a key card against a Storm deck, against Ad Nauseam or something, maybe buy us a turn or two. Same with Judge's Familiar, kind of makes our opponent play off curve a little bit to cast their combo finishes. So we can use these elements to like buy us a turn, maybe 2 turns at best, but our clock just isn't fast. Like, we're playing 1/1s, lots and lots of 1/1s. The things that aren't 1/1s are 2/2s or 2/3s. So we're not really pressuring our opponent enough. When you see some of the tempo decks that work, it's usually light elements of tempo. You got some Remand, you got a little bit of that stuff, which is, our deck does have a little bit of that, but it's backed up by Delver of Secrets, or Death Shadows, or Tarmogoyfs, something to take advantage of those elements. If you're gonna have a really slow clock, I think we need more heavier control elements to have a shot against the unfair decks. So I think that those are kind of the flaws with the deck. Aggro is a problem, but it's a very fixable problem, because white has tons of great answers. We mentioned Lone Missionary, Kitchen Finks, you can play any of that stuff. There's so many good against aggro cards you can play in a base white deck, so that shouldn't be a problem. The bigger problem is the unfair decks, and that one's a little harder to fix. So I think that if our goal is to fix that matchup, things like Thalia in the main deck might be a good idea. Having some counters in the sideboard, like negates or something, could be beneficial. So I think that that's where we need to invest our effort with this deck to make it really work. And I feel like this draft is really rough. It feels very much like someone started with the standard deck, made a few modern upgrades, which are of a variety of power levels. Some are good, some are not especially good. But I feel like the idea of a monument deck could go a lot further and could be pretty sweet. I mean, one potential would be to play monument in an Emiria deck. It kind of naturally fits what the deck is doing. It's 3 mana, so it gets back our Sun Titans. It also rams us into our Sun Titans. We have the ability to play a lot of weird creatures in that deck and a lot of value there. So I think that that's possibly one of the things that we could do with this deck would be head the Emiria path and be like an Aketra's Monument Emiria deck. I think Dusk Dawn is really hit or miss. It's a card that's great in those grindy matchups, the grindy mid-range fair deck matchups. It's really good, but do we need to be better in those matchups, or could that slot, or at least part of that slot, be better used with more Path to Exiles, for example? A card that's doing something in our bad matchups, or some negates maybe, something that's doing something in our bad matchups instead of just making us a little bit better in probably our best matchups against grindy mid-range decks where we just have this insane value engine anyway. We can block well, we can be tricky, we can generate value with Skyasar. So I feel like it's kind of a win more card in this deck where, yeah, it could do some awesome things and we did win games because of it, but there were games that we probably could have won anyway, even without casting Dusk to Dawn. And a lot of times we were literally having to spend 4 mana just to get it in the graveyard. I don't think we ever killed a single one of our opponent's creatures with the Dust Half. So it was kind of like 9 mana, get back a bunch of our creatures, splitting it up over 2 turns, which makes it a little better. But it's still like, it never really lined up that well. So maybe Dusk Dawn would be better off as a sideboard card as a 1 or 2 of, rather than a main deck piece. But I think it comes down to your meta. If everyone's playing Jund and Abzan and those type of grindy decks, the mid-range decks, the fair decks, I think this is good. If everyone's playing aggro, I think this can work with the updates we talked about, Kitchen Finks, Lone Missionaries. I am interested in maybe Emiria. Definitely fix the mana base with more dual lands and ghost quarters. That was a big frustration through our matches. Update the sideboard a bit to improve our worst matchups, the combo matchups, the aggro matchups, rather than being as focused on control, which is kind of where this seems to be. And I don't even know if that's that bad of a matchup for us anyway. So those are my suggestions. The deck is sweet. Aketra's Monument can be super powerful. And I feel like this is just a very, very early draft of Aketra's Monument in Modern. And there's a lot of things that we can potentially do with it. So that's my big takeaway. I feel like Aketra's Monument in some form, something similar to this. Maybe it's a Death and Taxes deck that's more disruption based. Maybe it's an Emiria deck. Who knows? But I feel like the good parts of this deck could make a deck that's actually fairly competitive. I just don't feel like this exact build is quite where it needs to be yet because of some of those matchup issues and the focus and not really hitting all aspects of the metagame and having some really rough matchups. So while I think that the idea can get there, I don't think it's there yet. And I think it's going to take a lot of work and experimenting to really figure out where Aketra Monument fits. Also, maybe more payoffs for Monument could be good. I feel like we have one Westville Abbey. We do have the card draw engine, but a lot of times we were just making tokens for token's sake. And while the tokens did win us the game a lot of the time, we don't really have any specific payoffs. In Standard, you see people really focusing on making enough tokens to flip a Westville Abbey to win the game. We're just kind of making tokens to hopefully beat down with 1/1s, which can still get there, but maybe there's a way we can have a more fast, specific payoff for making so many tokens that allows us to close out the game quicker, which would then help solve the problem in the unfair matchups where our clock is just so slow that even if we have our Judge's Familiars or our Spell Quellers, our opponent's going to have time to draw out of the bit of disruption we do have and still put things together and beat us. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Lots of thoughts on the deck this week. Long wrap up. Anyway, it was fun. It was interesting. I don't think it's quite where it needs to be, but I do have hope that a Catcher's Monument can be a modern playable card. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the videos, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.